What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Influence. I am Kwame Appiah, your host. We are missing out on our co-host today, Scott, so I'll do my best to do justice for this conversation because we were both very, very excited to talk to our guest today. Our guest is not only a startup founder and very accomplished within the business world, but also happens to partake in something that is very close to home for me as a Netflix reality star. We are very, very excited to learn a lot today from Chris Allen. Chris, how you doing today, man?
Just two Netflix guys chopping it up, Kwame.
Yeah, right. We're basically just about to have a whole reality TV conversation, you know?
We can talk some business on the side.
Yeah, exactly. So how's it going? How's the week starting today for you?
It's good. I mean, this is the first week in 4 weeks where I don't have episodes of our show dropping. So it feels like life is starting to go back to normal a little bit. I'm starting to get, a little bit of the, let's take stock of what the world looks like after $1 Million Secret. What opportunities do I have? And for me, it's just all about I think I put up a status on my Instagram today. The work continues. Like, this is all what I've been building up to. It's over now. The work continues.
I can dig it. Yeah, I've seen I've seen some follower growth for you within the recent. I think we followed each other maybe just not too long ago, maybe a few days ago, and since then there's been some follower growth there. So there's definitely some notice coming around. How has it felt to kind of start getting a good bit of trickle following in?
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at it. I think I was probably one of the smaller contestants in terms of just awareness. I was not super out there with my social media. I was very business focused. And we did have some other folks on our show with much larger followings. So they're all aware of those sorts of things. They know, how to put together a TikTok, how to do, how to just go out to a restaurant and make content out of it, right? This is all sort of new for me, right? I was creating for a brand, not for myself. And now there is this large influx of people who are just interested in what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis, things that seem pretty mundane to me. So I'm getting used to it. It's obviously awesome because obviously folks that follow me, they're interested in my journey. They're there for one thing. They want to see what I'm up to. And, they're there because they are vested in my journey. I take that. I'm extremely humble about that. I mean, I'm genuinely humbled by the interest, and I hope to provide some value for those people.
That's awesome, man. You know what? We're obviously getting a little bit of dialogue in the beginning of this, and I want to make sure that for all of our listeners out there who are taking a moment to listen to today's conversation, I've given a little bit of a tiny spiel about you, but I want you to tell them, who you are in a quick bio so that the world can know a bit more about Chris today.
Yeah, sure. So I would just keep it real quick. I was a finance guy. I came up through the finance world all through my 20s, did like the Excel grindy type jobs in finance. And, I was making good money, but burned myself out super quickly. I made it to 27 and I feel like it's pretty good. Went back to business school, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that I liked business and I wanted to be involved in some way. And while I was there, I met a co-founder of mine who's from Uruguay, and his family grew up drinking coconuts and knew people who drank alcohol in coconuts. And that was around the same time that White Claw was coming up. And he came to me and he said, hey, I come from a family of beer distributors. That's sort of what my family business is. He said, hey, I know you know this world. I have this idea to basically do what White Claw is doing, but do it with coconut water and try to make it as healthy as possible, targeted at the health conscious people who want to party and still go to Pilates at 7 a.m. So that was right before COVID. I wasn't sure I was going to do it full time, but then COVID hit and I had that existential crisis that everybody did. And I said, hey, let's just go for it. So we sent it. Had a lot of success with the business. We were cruise lines, Caribbean, markets across part of the Eastern United States. And then as we started to get a little bit more geared up into the beverage world and the marketing side of the beverage world, I said, hey, I think there might be an opportunity for me to try to turn myself into a personality. Started casting for reality shows, and there was a bunch of real near misses in the reality world. I had opportunities. It wasn't the right timing, whatever it might be. And I had, frankly, Kwame, given up on it. I really had. And just out of the blue, this opportunity came up for $1 Million Secret, and they told me what network it was on. And from that point on, I said, just tell me where to, just literally just send me the boarding pass. I'll fly anywhere in the world. Do it.
That is awesome, man. Well, good. Now that we have segued our way into that part of the conversation, let's dive in a little bit more about $1 Million Secret. I know it's a newer show on Netflix. And there's been kind of this genre, this push within the kind of challenge game show that's got a very sophisticated approach. It's got like one or two target people, and then everyone else trying to figure out who that person is. You know, you have shows like Traders, you know, things like that. And I feel like there's a lot of alignment within these shows, and I feel like people really, really love this genre. You know, it's really freaking super cool. It's challenging. It's thought provoking. And while you're at it, you have these really cool people who have really big personalities as well. So with that being said, you are, you know, a participant on Million Dollar Secret. I'd love to know a little bit about how it all started. How, like, you know, obviously you said you started casting for shows, right? And then you got the opportunity. How did that all unfold? Because I'm sure when you first got the, you know, initial steps going, you were still like, okay, maybe this might not work out. Maybe this is, you know, I'd love to know how that introduction phase went.
Yeah, such an interesting question, and I think, you know, a lot of the shows that I have been cast for over the years or asked to interview for are love related shows, not unlike the one that you went on, right? So
Yeah.
it's that was sort of where I was geared up to do, and I was kind of like, okay, you know, obviously you have things going on in your dating life, you know, and you're like, well, this is not a good time because I'm dating somebody, right, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had those near misses. And then in 2023, I had a really long casting process with Big Brother. And those are the types of shows that I really kind of grew up watching: Big Brother, Survivor, alliance-y based shows. And I got really, really close with Big Brother. And it was at a time where I really could have used it for my business, to be quite honest. It was really a very critical year for us. And I got cut in the final cut. At that point, I said, okay, I've tried this. You know, I'm done. Like, we're not going to do this anymore. It just didn't work out for me. I got really close. And one of the casting directors that I had on a prior, actually a dating show that I decided was not a good fit for me, reached back out in the spring of 2024 and said, hey, there's a concept that I have that I think is perfect for you. It's a strategy show. And I want to see sort of your business brain play out in this strategy type world. You know, would you be interested? Obviously, when you found out it's Netflix, that sort of raises the stakes a little bit. I was super interested in it because we were not told a lot about the show, Kwame. We did not know what show we were going on. In episode 1 of our show, our host comes down the stairs and tells us the rules of the game. That is when we learned what show we were on. We did not know anything other than 12 people, $1 million, and there's going to be some backstabbing involved. That's all we knew. So
that's awesome.
I was all about it. Once I heard, I mean, obviously, like that first day, you hear the rules, and then you go, you know, have a night of sleep, and everybody's just like, okay, now I know the rules. I'm going to write out all these different strategies, like things. But we literally learned it on camera.
Yeah. Wow. I really love that. So yeah, I guess that is a fact that a lot of people don't know when they watch these kind of shows. Is I feel like people think the cast members go in prepared and they have these strategies in mind, but I feel like for a lot of these first season reality shows that deal with strategy, it's almost it's a working title until you start recording.
I know our working titles were different than the title of the show that actually people know it by now too.
Yeah.
But what I think is so interesting about it too is, as like a fan of Survivor and Big Brother, a lot of the people who end up on Big Brother and Survivor are Big Brother and Survivor super fans. They have encyclopedic knowledge of like, oh, I'm in a situation like, you know, Joe in season 18. Maybe if I do this sort of alliance, I'll be able to get out of it, right? We did not know the rules of the game. And as a result, I think what people are sort of responding to with $1 Million Secret is it's a little messy. The strategies are not worked out. Like, we make some pretty big mistakes. And that's because we didn't know what show we were going on. We were not super fans. Even if you had studied the Traders, the gameplay mechanics are totally different because we only have one millionaire. So
that's a really good point, man. I think there's a lot that goes into these shows to make them dynamic once you get past season 1.
Yep.
Right? Because season 1 will always have the most ambiguity. It's like, what am I doing? How do I make this work? How do I not make a mistake? And then from there, like, even when I think about it, I've always wanted to be on Traders. I've been, you know, I will apply till the day I die. And I've spoken to a couple of the casting producers, so hopefully it works out at some point. But ultimately, every time that I watch Traders with my wife, we're always thinking like, oh, this is a situation that has happened before, and it seems like they're playing off of it. And most of you know, the interview style situations that people get into, they're like, yeah, you know, I've seen traders do this before and it's been a mistake, right? And so there's a lot of knowledge and background knowledge and understanding in the show. And so I love first seasons. You are the original, that's got to feel good. And, in terms of your participation and how things went, how do you feel about your success on the show?
It's funny. I think my game, for those who have watched it, was so clean up until it wasn't. Right. For me, I went through the first 5 eliminations of the house and I'm like, I'm breezing through this. I remember we had that last break day, right? As you know, we took a break, right? And then we went into film sort of the final week. And I remember sitting there thinking, we have a straight run through to the end. I'm like, I think I can win this show. I really think I can win it. I didn't go there thinking I could win. It's a 1 in 12 chance. But I went through the first 5 eliminations. I had strong alliances and I was never once at the elimination table named as somebody to be under consideration to be, voted out. And I'm like, okay, I have a lot of stock built up. If I get the $1 million at some point, I think I have a little bit of trust that I can kind of just like evade scrutiny. But then like my house of cards that I had built just fell down on me in the course of like 6 hours. And the viewers of episode 6 of our season will know what that was like, because it went from basically all eyes were on one other person. And then every move that I had made and every decision, 50-50 call that I had made went the opposite way all at once. I got a couple unlucky breaks too. And then it was like, I was under fire and then I was out before I could know it. Like I legitimately was like, the prior eliminations, I didn't even pack my stuff. I was like, I'm clean, right? For this one, I'm like, okay, I'll do it, but I still don't think I'm going home. And then I went home.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think in strategies, like there's an interesting alignment there with life, right? Where you could be so consistent and so good for so long. And then, one little crack, one little breakthrough, one little unfortunate slip. And then next thing you know, you're tumbling down a hill.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's so interesting about $1 Million Secret too is that there's a log line of the show, right? Which is one person in the house has $1 million in their room, their bedroom, basically in a box. And you have to figure out who it is, vote them out in order to take the money out of their box and put it in somebody else's box, right? But that wasn't exactly the way that our game played out. There was a lot of like, well, if we don't know who it is, or if we do know who it is, maybe we just vote some stronger players out. Maybe we like tie up in some alliances that have a numerical advantage to just kind of mow the other side down if we can get it, right? And the bigger thing is you have to think about your relationship and how you relate to every single person in the house in order to think about how would this, if this situation played out, do I have this relationship? Do I have this relationship, right? And for me, I made a split-second decision that harmed arguably my main alliance in the house. And ultimately that snowballed into fracturing all of my alliances at once. And I didn't think that through, because you have to think in terms of like second order effects in a game like this, where you have a touch point to every single person in the house. So it's a lot of foresight that's required. And unfortunately, we don't get to think before we go into these scenes. They just sort of happen. And you're like, okay, make a decision. I hope it plays out for me. And then, obviously when the viewer watches it back, they're like, you idiot. It's like, well, it's hard when you're in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
No matter what, for you or for the viewer, anytime that you're watching something over, you have time to think. You know what I mean? You have time to really digest everything that's going on. And I think about these moments myself, right? When I watch Love is Blind over, I'm just always like, bro, what in the world, right? Like you have these moments, you're like, those moments, the cartoon moments where you're like, stupid.
Right? It's funny too, because I'm sure you probably, like, I felt this way. I'm sure you do too, where like, if you watch back your episodes, you can remember being in that moment really clearly, but you don't remember what you were thinking to lead you in that specific place. Like, yeah, I remember what that was. Like, I remember the view out this way. I remember who I was talking to, but like, I don't remember my thought process.
Yeah.
It's like, I wonder what Chris is going to do next.
Oh man, it's great. It is great seeing yourself go through something of that degree and realizing how that version of you, because I'm sure you who you are now is different from who you were then.
Definitely.
Right. And it could be just 1% difference, but that 1% might have done something different at that point in time. And so there's a lot of critical change that goes on, especially when you go through an experience like this. I think, I don't want the entire world to become obsessed with applying for reality TV shows, but I do think being on a reality TV show has a really, really special experience tied to it that really helps you grow in a big way. And if I could in some way take that experience and embed it on every single person that I ever meet, I think it would change a lot of people, and hopefully for the better. I mean, I think it changed me for the better. When you're going through the experience, you're going through the experience with other people as well. And I think that creates, it's a special kind of social process that you gain from it, right? Social learning. You learn a lot more about the sociology of things, about habits, about people, about yourself, about others. So there's a lot of benefit as a whole. And it's funny because you went on this show to get this experience, and I'm sure you gained so much more from it. And so like all in all, like it paid off in such a big way. So I'm glad that, you went through it and you're here now. And, I think going through and watching the episodes, some of the challenges were really interesting, And so what I wanted to ask you is what do you think was the most difficult challenge for you?
Yeah. So the viewers of the show will know there was a balloon challenge in episode 5 where we shot balloons at basically like our opponent's head stuck inside of a puppet head at a board, probably, I would say maybe 40, 50 feet away. And what the viewer probably can't notice in doing that is it was really hard to do. And a lot of us failed at it while we were just practicing. So that's why I'm covered in paint in the scene. You see paint all over my face, all over my clothes. Everybody was just really kind of learning their way through it. And it was a freezing cold day. We filmed in Kelowna, Canada, on the water, raining. None of us had dressed for the rain, so we were freezing. And we struggled to hit the targets. And, I ultimately ended up hitting the winning shot of that challenge. That was definitely the hardest one. They were all difficult. I got chased by a rabid dog. I got qualified.
That was like episode 1.
It was episode 1. That was the first thing we did. I was like, what kind of show are we on here? Because we didn't know. We thought the dog was literally going to just like attack us. We didn't know it was going to go for something on our belt. So, I mean, I was like, whatever it might be. I also got disqualified from a challenge for trash talking too hard, which is interesting. I can't say I'm surprised that happened, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the trash talk for me, right? I like to consider myself a pretty humble, pretty gentle human being. I'm someone who wants to make sure everybody has fun, but trash talk is probably one of my favorite things to do. Mm-hmm. When you're in competition, and I love trash talking, especially when I've built rapport with someone, because at that point in time, I'm not making an enemy. I'm just having a good time.
Yeah, and the person who I trash talked was on the other team was Jamie from our season, and she was my teammate in, I think, almost every other challenge. She was my teammate, including places where we had teams of 2 or 3. So it was my first time to kind of go against her. She just baited me into it, and it was just like, I just went too hard. But you know what? Listen, like, all's well that ends well. And like you said, the whole experience of being on the show was by far the greatest experience of my life. I'm so excited to be sort of in your position a few years hence and say like, okay, let's look at this perfectly captured version of myself from a few years ago during this incredibly momentous period of my life and be like, look how far I've come. Look what I learned. Like, look at the challenges that I've overcome since. So for me, like I said, the work is just beginning.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, all's well that ends well. You're in a great spot right now. If you could do anything differently, looking at it now, I mean, I know you've kind of given me a breakdown of the tough moment that you had that really got you out of there. But as you watch it and you have those moments and you're like, Chris, you could have done this, you could have done that. Is there something where you're like, this is the one thing that I would have changed? Yeah,
for sure. And honestly, I think this is a kind of instructive point about what you were saying about you wish that everybody could have the opportunity to have the reality TV experience just for what it means for personal growth, right?
Yeah.
I found it really instructive. Obviously, I love when people see me and they like me and they respond to me, right? But like, as you know very well, there's a whole other contingent of people who see every little thing that's wrong about you and they point it out to you. Like, you try not to see it, but you do see it. And for me, I actually think it's a really interesting thing to say. Let me look at myself in a pressure cooker and let me see what parts of myself that come out that I don't like, and
Yeah.
use this as an opportunity to reflect and actually respond to feedback, right? I don't necessarily just say anything negative, I'm not going to look at it. And for me, something that I've always dealt with, maybe it's like the Ivy League guy in me or whatever it might be, is overconfidence. Like, in, just going and be like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And then you get to the challenge and it's like, the challenge has hands. You know what I mean? Like, it's tougher than I thought. So
Yeah.
in the show, I definitely was too confident toward the end that I was sort of untouchable. And watching that back, I'm like, yeah, I should have been way more guarded, way more humble about the fact that I was competing in a level game with everybody else. And as a result, like, frankly, that's something I've worked on for years, and clearly I'm not done yet. I mean,
Yeah.
I saw it come up, bite me in the ass in a really, really important time in my life. So those are, definitely, listening more, talking a little bit less, and being more humble. Those are things that I'm working on.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. It sums it up really well. I think it sums it up for most people going through their day to day, most people in interactive situations as well. You know what I'm saying? I feel like listening more is definitely something that can help all of us in a big way. And you said it. You're an Ivy League guy. You seem like a confident guy. You seem like you're okay with putting yourself out there. And I feel like for a lot of us that are okay with being out there, sometimes it also comes a lot with, if I'm going to be out here, I might as well make it worth my while. And when I'm out there, making it worth my while means going up and introducing myself and saying these things, and at times making my opinion be known. And, it takes a bit of learning to understand that sometimes making your opinion be known is probably the least important thing that you need to do in that moment. It's more about figuring out what's going on around your surroundings and then understanding how that then guides your opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
Yeah.
requires a tremendous amount of self-control too. I think, like, that's something that is good to practice in normal life situations, but really hard to do when you're in the situation of competing for $1 million against a bunch of other, really uh, like hardwired people, right? So you look at that and you're like, yeah, the situation does bring out some things about myself that I need to work on, and
Yeah.
also it's a great way to sort of reveal those things too, because it's a lot easier to do, I think, in your normal life. So now it's like, yeah, I've had the hardest experience possible of working on these sorts of things. Let me take it
Yeah.
back to my normal life. Let me take it back to my business life. Let me take it back to my personal life, relationships, family, all those sorts of things. So yeah, like I said, I'm excited for the growth to come from here, and I'm excited that $1 million secret is not the end of our lives. It's the first sort of chapter of the rest of our life. It's a waypoint on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I actually just finished listening to one of the conversations that we had with one of my favorite influencers slash creators. His name is Nick Koser. He's the dancing weatherman. You may have seen him at some point. He's got a suit on and he's out in Times Square doing dances, and he's accumulated quite a large following, right? 2.4 or 2.5, I think now, million on Instagram, and about 9 million on TikTok. And I think what he said there was that really struck with me, or stuck with me right before I hopped on this call. I was listening to that actually. And he said, whenever you become famous or go viral, that's not like, that's not it. That's not everything. Then that's when the journey really starts, right? And so now that you've gone through this thing, that's not it. You haven't achieved your pinnacle. This is when the journey really starts. So I think it's a cool culmination of things that really come back. And I love your realization and perspective on it, man. When you think about how this has all come together, and now applying it back to your life, your image, and then your brand and your product, we're going to circle around a lot of conversation, but I know that Osena is a big conversation topic, something that I really want to touch on, because, you're a brilliant mind. You've released something, you've put something out into the world, and it's a product, and it's having some success. I'd love to know the concept of Osena. I guess, yeah, let's revisit Osena as a product, right? How it matriculated, and then where you're headed now, especially with your experience on $1 Million Secret?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I think, the beverage world is really difficult. And I think we learned that as we talk about like overconfidence is like, yeah, oh yeah, I can make the White Claw of coconut water. And then you get out there and you realize like that just about anybody can approach Slack brewing capacity at a co-packer and say, hey, let's slap a label on it and get it to market. Now, we had certain advantages, right? We had connections in the distribution space. My co-founder had experience working in Anheuser-Busch. So he basically knew how to do this from soup to nuts. But the easier part for us was getting to market, which is actually the harder part for a lot of other beverage startups. We were able to get it on a lot of shelves. We were able to, create a brand. We were able to connect with distributors and retailers and get it, to cruise lines and islands and things like that. The harder part for us was getting people to care. And because we distributed in retail, we weren't able to necessarily target our consumer quite as well because we were broad. It's like, for example, I remember I had this experience where we ended up at a corner store. We ended up in a corner store in like Grand Rapids, Michigan, right? And I remember being like, okay, we launched it where I lived. Then we kind of grew out from there. And then I was like, wait a minute. Now it means that I need to turn product off the shelf in Grand Rapids, Michigan at an independent retailer where it's like mostly older men who shop there.
Yeah.
How am I going to do that? And then I kind of realized that like scale and awareness and scale in beverage, especially when you're in traditional retail, is really important, right? It's not necessarily quite as simple as like, because we can't distribute direct to consumer, right? Is how do I approach things that, will be able to get me awareness and scale? So one of those things is reality television, personality marketing, influencer marketing. Those sorts of things I think are really useful because you can't do like digital advertising. You gotta have somebody click through the ad and get it delivered to their door because liquid is really difficult. So one of the things that we want to do is, what I think is really interesting is we kind of like took the foot off the gas a little bit while we waited to see what the show would look like, and then try to create something as the next chapter for the brand that makes sense for the audience that I would attract and the audience that I'd be able to bring on. So one of the things that's really interesting, $1 Million Secret is a global show. And most of my fans are OUS. So alcohol, obviously really difficult to ship across border lines. So I would anticipate that the next thing that we do will likely be non-alcoholic.
Okay.
Is probably likely something that we can ship around the world a little bit easier, something that I can find the fans that have sort of joined this journey now. Whether that looks like a mixer or prebiotic, whatever that might be. I think that's definitely sort of where the consumer is going in beverage. And I think that's sort of like me responding to the audience, right? Because ultimately, like one of the things I remember from business school, I paid a lot of money for the degree. And I remember a few things, not a lot, is that you need to create a product that the consumer wants.
Yeah.
And the consumers that have followed me are generally global, health conscious people. And alcohol, while it works, it's really interesting kind of like thing is I think there are things we can do sort of outside of alcohol that make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. So funny, bringing up the conversation that I just had, Nick Koser is someone who's been sober for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And he mentions that in a lot of conversations. And, one of the conversations we had on Beyond Influence was with a beverage company that was named Mixology and rebranded as Smashed, which is actually a really now successful non-alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, that is a conversation topic that keeps coming up because it's been that, alcohol was a big catalyst for good times, for being in the party, being in the mix. And I feel like as generations go on and as you see Gen Z's kind of, they're not big alcoholics like, previous generations. They're very much so like, how can we do it without that aspect of things? And so I do think that there's a balance. I'm a drinker, not like a big drinker at all. I drink maybe like 1 or 2 drinks a week. If that, like last night, I got back from my soccer game and I was insanely sore. So I popped open a Modelo and I had a drink, and so
my favorites.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I love the belief that I could come home and pop open something that doesn't have alcohol in it as well and have that same kind of nourishing, relaxing, tranquil kind of drink in it. And so I love that non-alcoholic beverage space. I love that it's really, really trending, really popping off right now. So I think it's a great angle to go at, man. So what would look like success for you in this next iteration of Osena?
Yeah, well, I tell you this much. I want to be a multifaceted entrepreneur. So I want to be able to create, content around the journey of where we're
Yeah.
going as well.
Yeah.
So I think that the main thing is, first of all, in order to be successful as a beverage brand, it's a very personal industry, food and beverage, because you're consuming it in your body, right? So
Yeah.
you need to feel connected to the brands that you're associating with. So for me, it's if we can create a community and brand around Osena and around, any future projects as well, that, I feel like I'm meeting the consumer need. I'm feeling like they're connected to the brand because of me and my journey as well. And I think that there's like a little bit of a connection between the consumer and the founder and the brand, because now obviously I'm out there. I think that would be successful. I want to create products that are always leaning on the better for you side, health conscious. That's like why we did coconut water instead of beer, for example, right? So coconut water will always be at the foundation of what we're doing, because it's a miracle liquid that the earth has given us. And it's a huge passion of mine. I've obviously been in the space for many, many years. And then what I really want to do is take this opportunity where, like, I've been an entrepreneur before reality TV. Now I'm an entrepreneur after reality TV, and I get the opportunity to create content around the journey of creating businesses, because that beyond what the product is, whatever the product is, whether I'm creating, coconut water or something else, is the journey of entrepreneurship is my passion, right? And helping people do it in a way that is sustainable for them mentally and physically, because it is not always that way. And it wasn't for me. Like, before I went on $1 Million Secret, I ground myself to a pulp, basically. And I want to be able to help people illuminate the journey, illuminate the highs and the lows, and make it something that, because I think everybody kind of wants to be a business owner. A lot of people really want to be entrepreneurs, right? They don't know how to do it. And then when they do it, they're sort of chasing the dream, and they're just sort of burning the candle at both ends. It's like, okay, let's illuminate what the journey is really going to look like.
Yeah.
I can be an instructive example of that. I can talk to people who have done that as well. And we'll talk about what does real entrepreneurship look like.
Yeah. So how then, I guess, it seems like this is something that you're passionate about, just to touch on, what it is and where you plan to take it. Ultimately, it seems like you have a very deep interest in, like, the health of founders, right? Health of people who want to go out there and start something on their own. I guess, what is the fascination? And I guess ultimately, what does it look like to see success within that realm for you? Like, what would you want to do?
This is the angle of content that I'm most passionate about, most interested in. And frankly, like, the opportunity, the miracle of getting cast on a reality TV show is worth it for the opportunity to be able to potentially give back and affect some change in this area, right?
Yeah.
Which is, if you look at society, any great innovation that has been created, right, is probably came from a startup.
Yeah.
So we need it as a society, as a global society. We need startups badly in order to continue the world to move forward. But the journey of entrepreneurship is a high wire act. And it can come with tremendous highs, and it can come with tremendous lows. And a lot of times you feel those in the same hour, not much less the same day, right? So if you look at the statistics around founder mental health, they're pretty jarring. I think you talk about 3/4 of entrepreneurs report mental health issues of some kind, which is significantly higher than the greater population. So I find it really troubling that this avenue that the world badly needs in order to continue driving innovation, creating new products that we all love, putting new things on the shelf, creating new technologies, is so fraught for the people who are actually creating them. And it shouldn't have to be that way, because I think for me, I found entrepreneurship a incredibly isolating experience. We should be breaking down barriers for entrepreneurs to talk to each other, create communities, have these difficult conversations. And, like, I don't like that the sort of standard entrepreneurial content is like Rolex wearing, Rolls Royce driving, let me sell you a course.
Yeah.
Like, because that's like maybe 1/10 of 1% of people who actually get there. The real reality is like, I have a family and I can't pay myself this month. How am I going to make ends meet? Because the business, we didn't close this deal, right? How are my family going to band together and support this? It's really, really difficult. But I
Yeah.
think we need to talk about those things and not necessarily just glorify like entrepreneurship is the key to your dream life. It can be, but
Yeah.
along the way, you're going to be stepping over broken glass.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we as a society are so glued to instant gratification that it feels like the more others show that or project that to us, the more that we desire it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the exact theory that you're talking about, most of these entrepreneur scales are, let me show you my fancy watch and my fancy car, mostly rented. And it's going to be something that, invites you to come buy my course, which is ultimately how I'm actually making my money to
Mm-hmm.
go
Yep.
rent this
Yep.
vehicle. And so we really have to reframe and think about what true entrepreneurship is, that it's not about, big house, fancy car.
Right.
It's about freedom, right? And ultimately freedom that is built up off of your work and discipline. It takes a very, very long time to get there. I won't lie. I think I have a bit of an instant gratification mindset in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things. Like as a kid, I always wanted a Lamborghini, and like the more money that comes along my way, the more that I think about this Lamborghini. So much so that I almost thought about buying one for myself on my birthday, just 15 days ago.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that I know, like, it could happen. I'd have to go on a ramen noodle diet for a few weeks. But what I really need to start thinking about more is I've gotten to this point and I see the potential of being able to do that thing that I've always wanted to do as a kid. And so how do I then build on that potential so that if I were to secure that thing for myself, it wouldn't take away from my quality of life?
Yeah.
Yeah, our instant gratification a lot is tied to things that take away from our quality of life. I want to do this really, really, really nice thing, but my life is going to get really, really hard for quite a while.
Yep.
And we need to figure out a way to reframe our mind so that regardless of this amazing thing that we get to do for ourselves, we've had enough patience to know that we have built a foundation around us that will not take away from how we function, the things that make us happy, the things that make us normal.
Yeah, and even if you let's say you start a company with the goal of getting rich overnight and buying a Lamborghini, right? You're going to enjoy the Lamborghini when you're driving the Lamborghini, but the rest of your life you're not behind the wheel of the car, right?
That's true.
The real goal is not necessarily to buy yourself a Lamborghini, right? You'd love to have it. I mean, I fully support you getting it, right? But it's is a life that you created when you're not behind the wheel of that car a life that you want to live in, right? And if entrepreneurship is such a meat grinder that your daily existence is a grind, then it may not be worth it just to get the car, right? What you want to do is pursue sustainable entrepreneurship and freedom, where you feel valued for your work, where you feel like there's a linkage between your input and your output, and also you enjoy the process of creating whatever is next for you in your business, right? So like that can be sort of invigorating, right? If you do it the right way. But I say these things as somebody who has the foresight of having 5 years as an entrepreneur. I was not living that mentality for most of the time that I was doing this.
Yeah, I really like that. I think sustainable entrepreneurship is a really, really good way to look at a lot of things, regardless of what you're going after. Like whatever your goal is, it has to be sustainable, because you do make a point of instant gratification is very, very, very temporary, right? If I have a Lamborghini, I might be able to drive that Lamborghini once a week, right? Is my 90 hours of work worth 1 hour of enjoyment per week? It probably isn't. Right. But can I scale it back to where I create a life for myself where I'm working a 40, 45, 50 hours a week, something that makes more sense? And sometimes you grind a bit more, right? Like people who are successful, they work hard no matter what, no matter which way you put it. But ultimately, you do want to give yourself a place where you have some understandable work-life balance, because you want to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And that's a big part of it. So sustainable entrepreneurship, that's a great term we want to focus on.
Sustainable and entrepreneurship community too is the other one. Is like a lot of this is like the lone wolf mentality of like, I'm just going to grind, I'm locking the world out until I get my goal. Right. But one thing that's really missing from being an entrepreneur is like a lot of people go to an office and they work with other people who have the same job as them, and they can ask questions and they can be like, oh, I had a problem with this thing. Right. Entrepreneurial community is hard to find. I was only able to find really one in 5 years that I was doing this that really felt like I could actually go to them and be like, I'm having this problem. Is anybody else having this problem? Hearing about other issues, hearing about people's struggles, it makes you feel like you're not alone. So building in community into your work as well is, I think, super important.
Yeah, 100%. Man, you're dropping a lot of dimes for us, Chris. I think, in this conversation, as we get closer to the end, I want to know and tie back together all of these different aspects of who you are.
Yeah.
You got an opportunity to go through business school, to start a business, to be on, a reality show, and all of those things are coming together and pointing you in a direction that you'd hope to be in. And so you are really manifesting a good part of where you want your life to go. And I think that that's a really awesome thing for you, man. So now that you are here, I've seen obviously you're putting out a bit more content.
Yeah.
You're getting more in tune with the influencer marketing side of things. And, having worked at Later and being head of influence here, it's a big topic for me. So with that being said, now that you are getting more exposure to the world around you within the influencer marketing scope, do you have any brands that have already approached you? Any agencies that have already approached you? Like, have you gotten any opportunities to possibly partner with anybody already?
Yeah, no, actually I haven't. So if anybody's interested, I'll be making all the content that I was just talking about. And, there's a healthy amount of fitness and just kind of like messing around that I like to have fun and laugh too. No, actually, because, what's so funny about it is like, this is like overnight. I mean, we're talking about, this is 2 weeks in to the $1 Million Secret game. So I have some feelers out there. I'm obviously not going to do anything in beverage, but I love food, love fitness, mental health platforms, things like that. Those are places that I want to be working with. So I look forward to it. And honestly, like, as somebody who's run a brand, I'm excited to be, should somebody think that I'm worthy of doing this, a spokesman for a brand, because I would take the care with somebody else's brand the same that I would with my own, because I've been a business owner. I know what it means to have your brand's name in somebody else's mouth. I'm excited to see how that translates.
For sure, man. And I think, the good thing about where you are right now is, like, even for us who have gone through what, is, I would say, one of Netflix's top 5 biggest shows ever, you don't really get all the view. I would say about 1/5, maybe 1/4 of the audience watches it within that, like, those release dates. A lot of people like to wait till it's done to binge it through. And so I could see a lot more of your fandom coming in within, I would say, the next few weeks, now that, there's no new releases coming out. So look out for that. Now, do you have, one ideal brand, 1 or 2 ideal brands that you would say that you would jump for joy if they did reach out to you to work with you?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's not going to surprise anybody who just listened to this conversation, but I think like BetterHelp would be awesome, because I just like to be involved with those sorts of platforms that are creating space for people to talk about their mental health and to talk about how that, reverberates through the rest of their lives. But it's not all just conversations about that too. I also love fitness. And I was, one of the cool things about our show is we had to we were assigned animal totems.
Yeah.
And I got a wolf. So I love the brand Dark Sport, the gym brand, and they have basically a wolf as their mascot. I would love to sign up with the gym brand. It's where I spend most of my free time. So it's kind of like, I'd love to pick up some other hobbies, but this is all I got right now. So
yeah, no, I can dig it. That's awesome, man. I love that alignment, right? Once again, another little manifestation concept. So, as we get closer to the end of this, to kind of button things up in terms of your desires and your direction and where you want to go, do you have any mantras or quotes, do you think, that you live by, that you would, want to kind of embody as a human being, but also pass on to the rest of the world or the people listening?
Yes, definitely. And I used to write, because obviously we didn't have our cell phones. $1 Million Secret, I used to write at night. I would get the diary. I think a lot of us did. I kept a quote in my book, which is my favorite quote, really probably ever, which is from Arnold Palmer, the golfer. And the quote is about golf, but I apply it to life, which is you must play boldly to win.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I thought about it in the context of the game that I was playing. But I also think about it in terms of life, which is in order to get the things that you want, I think taking risks in a smart way, playing boldly in life, whether that be like admitting you have a crush on somebody, instead of keeping it in, whether that means, I'm going to take the business idea off a napkin and build a prototype. We'll see if we have something here, right? Let's say, I want to connect with an old friend rather than just kind of wishing what it would be like. Let me invite them to coffee. Telling people how you feel about them, right? Play boldly to win, doing interesting things in life and seeing where it takes you. That's kind of been my mantra thus far. It's, it's worked out at times and other times it hasn't worked out, but I think it's something I'll continue to live by is you must play boldly to win.
Yeah, that is awesome, Chris. Well, hey man, it has been a great conversation today. Excited for you and everything that's about to happen. Obviously, the show is I think a huge success, and I think it's on its way to being even more of a success as people really, really start digesting it and learning about how cool it really is. And you know how social media is; it takes just a few really, really wild viral posts about how crazy $1 Million Secret is. And then next thing you know, everybody's on it. So Excited for you, man. It seems like you got a lot going on for you. And it's not just this show that you went on. You had a really, really successful life prior to it. And you are on your way to even more successful things after. So thank you so much for joining me today on Beyond Influence, man. It was a pleasure having you.
Well, it was awesome. And I'm so glad I got a chance to chop it up and talk about business with another Netflix guy, man. I feel like we had a lot of unique commonalities in life. And I'm excited to see where our journeys go from here. Maybe we'll end up at the Traders Castle together in a couple of years.
Oh, that would be super cool, man. Let's I love it. You are a big manifester, so I'm crossing my fingers that both of our powers of manifestation lead us there. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. We are very, very excited to continue on with this. So we will bid you farewell for today. We will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in, and bye-bye.